I started doing this book in 2017 called Stop the Chaos. It's available on eBay. But actually, I was in a group, and how to get control of your life by beating alcohol and drugs. And then there's a semicolon, or mental, social, emotional problems, barriers to success, chaotic, how to get chaos out of a chaotic life, and it can keep going on and on and on. It's about gaining control. And so stop the chaos. So steps to recovery. Surround yourselves with others who are committed to leading a sober life. You need to be completely honest. Keep an open mind. Be willing to do the things suggested by others. Don't pick up. Believe that you can do it. Identify triggers. Put in work. Ask for help. Practice self-care. God, I offer myself to thee to build with me and to do with me as thou wilt. Relieve me of bondage of self, that I may better do thy will. Take away my difficulties, that victory over them may be bear witness to those I would help of thy power, thy love, and thy way of life. That's the third step prayer. We admitted we were powerless over our addiction, that our lives had become unmanageable. We come to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity. We made a decision to turn over our will and our lives over to the care of God as we understood. We made a searching and fearless moral inventory of ourselves. We admitted to God, to ourselves, and to another human being the exact nature of our wrongs. We were entirely ready for God to remove all of these defects of character. We humbly asked Him to remove all of our shortcomings. We made a list of persons we had harmed and became willing to make amends to them all. We made direct amends to such people whenever possible, except when to do so would injure them or others. We continue to take personal inventory, and when we were wrong, promptly admitted it. We sought through prayer and meditation to improve our conscious contact with God, praying only for knowledge of His will and the power to carry it out. Having had a spiritual awakening as a result of these steps, we try to carry this message to addicts and to practice these principles in all of our affairs. Stop the chaos. How to get control of your life by beating alcohol and drugs. This is for anyone who needs information and guidance about alcohol and drug addiction, including people who are concerned about a loved one's drinking or drugging. It is for people who aren't quite sure whether they have a problem with their chemical use, and for people who've tried to stop using. Many people view alcoholism and drug addiction as a weakness or moral issue. Research has shown the true nature of addiction. It affects all types of people, men and women, young and old, rich and poor. Alcoholics and addicts lose the ability to control their chemical use because of brain chemistry changes. Addiction is also a family disease. Alcohol and drug users create chaos not only in their lives, but also in the lives of family and friends. Addicts or alcoholics may be so wrapped up in denial that they refuse to look at the destruction. Family and friends are confused, hurt, and desperate for an answer. Reading this book can help loved ones to understand addiction and ultimately to learn how to help themselves. The disease of alcohol and drug addiction can be treated. Alcohol and drug addiction or chemical dependency is a progressive and potentially fatal disease. Addiction is a complex process. Treating addiction likewise requires a multifaceted approach that addresses the mental, physical, emotional, and spiritual aspects of a person. This book identifies symptoms of alcohol and drug abuse and dependency and the changes needed for a return to a healthy, meaningful life without chemicals. For the chemical user, these questions are answered. Do I really have a problem with drugs and alcohol? What is addiction and how does it work? What can I do to stop or to moderate my own chemical use? What do I do when I can't stop using alcohol or other drugs? What changes do I need to make in my life to stay sober, and how do I make them? For family and friends, these questions are answered. Why does my spouse partner put drinking and drugging ahead of the family's needs? If he or she loved me, wouldn't they quit? What can I do to get my husband, wife, partner, or friend to stop using? Why do I feel crazy living with someone who's abusing alcohol or other drugs? How can we rebuild our relationship? Regardless of the drug of choice, whether it be heroin, Valium, vodka, beer, every addict and alcoholic has a chance at a new life. And everyone, including family and friends, benefits from the peace and serenity that recovery from addiction provides. Am I an addict or an alcoholic? Dope helps me get through the day. Nothing wrong with that. A couple of martinis and some wine at lunch. That's not much. Just a few beers with the guys after work. That's all. Congratulations on deciding to explore chemical abuse and addiction. If you are reading this book, you probably have many questions concerning alcohol or other drug use. Many people first become concerned about their alcohol or the other drug use of that other person because of some negative consequence. Legal difficulties resulting from driving while intoxicated, assault or domestic violence may bring attention to a chemical problem. Loss of employment or broken relationships may also lead us or others to question our use of chemicals. Frequently, a family member, friend, or employer may say something about the amount of our drinking or drugging. These are signs for us to take a closer look at our chemical use. I was going to have only a couple, but I ended up having about 8. Alcohol and other drug use is part of our culture. Many people in the United States use alcohol or other drugs socially. Many others don't use alcohol or drugs at all. They just don't seem interested. In the United States, 1/3 of the population abstains, does not use alcohol or other drugs. About 1/3 uses occasionally on a social basis. About 25% abuses alcohol and other drugs. The remaining 6 to 8% of the population has crossed the line into addiction. If we are social users, we can take it or leave it. If we are chemical abusers, we may go through a stage of consuming intoxicating amounts and then moderate or limit our use or lose interest. If we are addicts, we lose control of our chemical use and continue to drink and drug despite negative consequences. It is difficult to accurately assess the level of abuse or addiction in ourselves or someone we know. Anger, fear, denial, and concerns about what others may think can make us misinterpret or play down what we see. Many of us also be concerned about being labeled an addict or alcoholic. The line between chemical abuse and chemical dependency confuses most people. We need more information on the differences between social use, chemical abuse, and chemical dependency. Can I take it or leave it? Some of us question whether we really have a problem with alcohol and other drugs, or are just social users. Social users rarely have consequences associated with alcohol or other drug use. They have little desire to use alcohol or other drugs to intoxication. They may say, "Oh, I hate that feeling of being out of control." They may leave a drink half finished Their lives do not revolve around chemical use. The people they associate with are unlikely to be heavy abusers or addicts. Alcohol or other drugs simply are not an issue in their lives. Not all drunks are alcoholics. Not all people with alcohol or other drug problems are alcoholics or addicts. Some people may consume large amounts of drugs or alcohol, appear to be intoxicated on many occasions, but may not be dependent on those chemicals. They lack the spiritual, emotional, psychological, or physical dependence associated with addiction. Everyone has heard of people who drank, drugged, or smoked cigarettes excessively, and then one day, out of the clear blue, decided to stop. They seemed to have no problem quitting. For them, quitting was a matter of willpower and determination. These people hadn't crossed the line into addiction. Chemical abusers are just that, people who use chemicals in an abusive manner. If abusers start to experience negative consequences because of their chemical use, they can decide to moderate or stop. Programs are available to help them make those decisions. There are ways to help us determine whether we're abusing chemicals. One important way to listen to what others say to us about our alcohol or other drug use. There are ways to help us determine whether we're abusing chemicals. One important way is to listen to what others say to us about our alcohol or other drug use. Often, those close to us see our situation more clearly than we do. Okay. Exercise 1A. Check the appropriate box in the response to the question. If you answer yes to any of the questions, consider taking a close look at your chemical use. Okay, question number 1. Has a friend or family member expressed concern about your use? Has your social life changed, or have you switched friends? Have you experienced a negative consequence from your use? Legal, emotional, physical. Do you find that your behavior changes when you use chemicals? Are you using chemicals to become more outgoing or to overcome fears? Do you go against your values or morals when you use alcohol or drugs? Be honest. Rationalizing behavior or consequences or making excuses will only hinder you from receiving help. Show these questions to someone who knows you well. Be willing to listen to what others may tell you about your use. Others may see changes that you don't. Remember that abusive drinking and drugging take a toll on the body and emotions. This is reason enough to take a hard look at your chemical use. We need to take some time to consider the serious and life-changing consequences of continuing to abuse chemicals. Abuse left unchecked, could progress into addiction. We can decide to moderate or stop our chemical use. It becomes our choice. We can get help by contacting a chemical abuse program that specializes in helping people moderate their alcohol and drug use. Crossing the line into addiction. Addiction is a complex disease with psychological, environmental, social, spiritual, and psychological components. How do we know if we have crossed the line into addiction? Do we identify with having problems with alcohol or other drugs? Remember this important point. We don't willingly choose to be addicted. Most people don't want that label or lifestyle because of the stigma. We're not anxious to admit to having any kind of problem with drugs or alcohol. Addiction knows no age, no gender restrictions, rich or poor, old or young, regardless of intelligence level, everyone is susceptible. Many alcoholics and addicts start out as social users. They progress to abusive users. Their level of abuse increased. Somewhere along the way, they crossed the line into addiction. Some become addicted early in their use, perhaps almost immediately. Others used for years before experiencing problems. They wonder how they could have used for so long without consequences and then suddenly spiral downward. Where are we along the sequence? Have we tried to convince ourselves that we are social users? Do we really have a problem with alcohol or drugs? There is no laboratory test for addiction. We look instead at our behavior and thinking. If we are concerned about addiction, we need to be rigorously honest. Answer the following questions as honestly as possible. Have other people talk to you about your alcohol and drug use? Have you experienced legal, work, family, or relationship problems because of your use? Have you quit using for a month or a week to prove you could and then started again? Does it seem that you need more or use more chemicals now than you used to? Have you ever experienced a loss of memory while using? For example, maybe you can't remember driving home after drinking or what you said or did at a party. Do you spend a lot of time thinking about using drugs or alcohol during the day? Have you tried to stop using but couldn't? Have you lied to others about your drinking or drugging or tried to hide your use? Have you ever regretted what you've done while using? Have you started to withdraw from others to protect your chemical use? Do you use drugs or alcohol to cope with life? Has your chemical use ever put yourself or others in danger? Answering yes to 3 or more of the questions in exercise 1B may indicate that you are addicted to chemicals. You need to get a professional assessment of your chemical use. An accurate assessment is essential. In talking to a professional, we need to be rigorously honest about our alcohol and other drug use. If we try to minimize our use or deny our consequences, we only hurt ourselves. Professionals have talked to many people like us. They are there to help, not to criticize or judge. They themselves may be in recovery from drugs and alcohol and truly understand what we're going through. Common traits of addiction. Addiction has 3 main characteristics: loss of control, denial, and preoccupation. Loss of control. Those of us addicted to mood-altering chemicals don't have the luxury of making a choice about our chemical use. The biggest difference between abuse and dependency is that as alcoholics and addicts, we have lost the ability to control our chemical use. We say that we are powerless over alcohol and other drugs. Powerlessness means being unable to predict or control when we use, how much we may use at any given time. We cannot foresee the outcome when we start to use drugs or alcohol. We cannot predict how much we will use. A pledge just to stop for a minute at the local bar or to just have a couple turns into an entire night of drinking or drugging. We find ourselves needing to use more and more, a condition called tolerance. We have vowed to quit or use on several occasions, but have been able to stop only for a short period of time or not at all. We tell ourselves that if we can stop for 3 months, we are not an addict or alcoholic. If we accomplish our goal, we immediately go back to drinking or drugging. We find that when we drink or drug, our behavior becomes unpredictable. We may violate our social or moral values. We do things that we would not consider doing while sober. Denial. A major obstacle to recognizing our addiction is denial. We tend to minimize or deny the effect our dependency has on others or ourselves. We minimize or lie about the amount of our chemical use. This behavior allows us to protect and to continue our alcohol or other drug use while preventing us from looking at the seriousness of our problem. We make excuses, explain away consequences, or blame others for our chemical use. We end up being the last to know how severe our alcohol and other drug use has become. Denial can be refusing to accept that we're alcoholics and addicts. We still see chemical use as an option. minimizing the severity of our dependency and what we need to do to stop our use. We try to control our use, ignoring the problems we've created because of our use, focusing on others people's faults rather than on our own, refusing to acknowledge people, situations, and events that cause us stress. We may deny the need to take action to resolve problems, believing that we can live with some dishonesty in our lives, secrets, or lying by keeping silent become habits for addicts and alcoholics. Raul and Susan each have a belief system that minimizes or denies the real scope of their alcohol and other drug use. Addiction is progressive. If these individuals do not get help, they will begin to suffer severe consequences. Yet, their denial holds them captive. They may have a problem. Denial prevents us from taking an honest look at our problems with drugs and alcohol. Personal stories. I've been stopped for DUIs on 3 occasions, but I had a good lawyer each time. Raul may have had a good lawyer, but he does not face the fact that he is drinking to intoxication and driving. He thinks if he beats the rap, he can continue his dangerous behavior. He denies that his drinking is a problem because he has avoided legal consequences. Another example. Sure, I have a drink once in a while, but I never have more than a couple drinks and never during the week. In reality, Susan is frightened of being dishonest. She is frightened and being dishonest. She drinks almost every day and her amount is rising rapidly. She tries to act normal when her children come home from school. She worries that if her husband or family finds out, she might end up divorced and separated from her children. She's thinking that because she cannot seem to quit, there is something morally wrong with her. Her refusal to acknowledge the problem is based on fear. Preoccupation. Another factor in addiction is the preoccupation that alcoholics and addicts have with their chemicals. Another factor in addiction is preoccupation that alcoholics and addicts have with their chemicals. Preoccupation means that we spend a great deal of time anticipating, planning, and protecting our chemical use. Thoughts of using fill our minds constantly. Anticipation of pleasure is combined with fear that somehow our plans will go astray. How, when, and where can I use next? How can I avoid trouble? Do I have enough of my drug of choice, or should I be getting more? This type of thinking illustrates what our priorities really are. Our performance on the job or our interactions with friends may suffer, but we don't want anything to interfere with our use of alcohol or other drugs. Chemicals take priority over our families and our health. Our drug and alcohol use comes first. Preoccupation includes obsessing and planning our chemical use while attempting to protect our next high. We want to make sure that we are able to do what we want to do when we want to do it. Example, personal story. At work, Woody found himself concentrating on going to the bar for happy hour that day. His boss had commented on his lack of focus on his work. Woody was counting the hours. He thought about how long it would be before he could drink again. As the afternoon went on, his anxiety grew. He projected how exciting this evening would be. He hardly waited to leave the office and rushed to his car. Another example. Betsy knew that her roommate was leaving for the weekend. It was the perfect opportunity to use chemicals without interruption. She had spent a week planning for this time. She had made sure to have enough cocaine. She had hidden her drugs with care so her roommate wouldn't find them. She had lied to several friends about her plans for the weekend so she could be alone. Betsy tingled with anticipation as she said goodbye to her roommate. Preoccupation includes obsessing and planning our chemical use while attempting to protect our next high. We want to make sure that we're able to do what we want to do when we want to do it. Not every alcoholic is a falling down drunk. Some of us conclude that we can't be an alcoholic or addict because we don't believe we had any consequence of our chemical use. We didn't seem to fit our own image of what an alcoholic or addict is. We may hold responsible jobs. We may even be quite successful. We always show up for work. We are well liked by other employees. We have no legal problems. I can't be an alcoholic. I've never had a DUI. We say, I never drink before noon. The above statements are typical of functioning alcoholics or addicts. If we are functional alcoholics or addicts, we are able to get along in society while continuing addictive use of chemicals. We have not yet experienced the heavy consequences of our use. We are on borrowed time. The progression of our illness will ultimately bring us down. Some of us drink or drug periodically. We abstain for various amounts of time and then go out on a binge. When we start our use, we experience loss of control. We drink or drug for the purpose of intoxication. We cannot predict the outcome of our use, and we may suffer consequences frequently. We may say, I can't be an alcoholic. I don't drink every day. Nevertheless, we are truly addicted. Not all of us look like the stereotypical addict or alcoholic. Whether we're chronic users with severe lifestyle consequences, binge users who plan on using experiences, or functional alcoholics or addicts whose friends and coworkers may be unaware of our using. The same principles apply. We all have the terminal, progressive illness of addiction. Our consequences will become increasingly more severe, and our emotional, spiritual, physical health will deteriorate. We will not be able to regain the ability to drink or drug normally again. We cannot overcome our addiction by ourselves. Willpower and strength of character will not play a role. We have lost control of our chemical use. We have become powerless over our addiction. Remember, there are different levels of chemical use: social using, abusing, and dependency. We need to be honest about our alcohol or other drug use. Being an alcoholic or addict has nothing to do with our worth as people. It's not a matter of weakness or moral failure. It's a matter of having a progressive illness that leads to serious legal, social, and physical consequences. And I may add spiritual consequences. We need to listen to what others are telling us because of our own minimizing and denial. We have difficulty seeing how serious our condition may be. The three main traits of addiction are loss of control, denial, and preoccupation. If there is any indication of chemical use problem, we need to seek professional help. Alcoholics and addicts can live spiritually sound and successful lives. We must take certain precautions. Treatment, counseling, or self-help groups can provide a basis for recovery. What chapter? What is chemical addiction? Accepting that we are dependent on drugs or alcohol is hard. We find we don't fit our idea of an addict or alcoholic. Old family values, cultural beliefs, movies, television shows have given us inaccurate pictures of alcoholics or addicts. These images have influenced our thinking. We may see people who are chemically dependent as losers or failures, or as people in the gutter of life, which is certainly not the way we want people to see us. The term addiction, addict, and alcoholic carry a stigma or feeling of shame. The terms addiction, addict, or alcoholic carry a stigma or feeling of shame. Many people believe that. Addiction is a weakness. If we were just morally or emotionally stronger, we could lick this problem. We should be able to stop using on our own. We just don't have enough willpower. If we were more disciplined, we'd be able to drink or drug in moderation. Don't buy into these myths. People who've never encountered the true nature of addiction can't conceive what we're going through. They've never experienced the inability to stop chemical use. They just don't understand the response of our loved ones and close friends can be partially hurtful. We may see addiction as unfair. No one ever said to us, "Hey, you, stand in line if you'd like to become an addict to alcohol or drugs and ruin your life." We weren't given that choice. We asked, "How did I end up this way? Why am I the one who has to be like this?" We see dependency as a curse in which we had no say. Someone we became dependent. But how? To answer these questions, we need to understand the addiction process. Its origin is deeper than poor control of our impulses. How did I get addicted? Addiction to drugs or alcohol is a complex illness. It's progressive and can be life-threatening. In addition to its social, psychological, and psychological components, several factors increase the risk for addiction. Drug availability. The more available drugs and alcohol are, the more likely we are able to take them. Even if mood-altering chemicals aren't readily available, we will find them if we really want them. Purity and route of administration. The purity of the drug and the route of administration, how we take it, determine the level of euphoria and how quickly we can reach it. If chemicals that give us quick and powerful high are more likely to be rapidly addicting. Purity of the drug includes the amount of alcohol, proof in the beverage, including injecting quickly, transmit the chemical to the brain, inhaling and injecting quickly, transmit the chemical to the brain, producing almost instant euphoria. Swallowing drugs and drinking are slower to produce the high. The quicker the euphoria, the more likely we are to repeat our drinking and drugging. Dose, frequency, and duration of use. The factor has to do with the amount of drugs we take, how often we do them, and over what length of time. Some drugs are more quickly addicting than others. While we may avoid the quick dependency to crack cocaine, using alcohol and other drugs over a sustained period can lead to addiction. Genetic factors. Certain groups of people and certain families seem to have higher addiction than others. Some families almost All members may be chemically dependent. Genetic makeup seems to influence susceptibility to addiction. Developmental factors. As we grow up, we develop our own attitudes about drugs and alcohol use by observing chemical use in our families, in society, and in our peer groups. Mental health disorders or chronic pain. Those of us afflicted with certain mental health conditions have a higher rate of addiction than the general population. People who have chronic pain may abuse pain medications in an effort to feel better and may eventually become addicted to the medications. Psychosocial factors. When people have meaningful alternatives to chemical use, the incidence of abuse and addiction is lower. Having sober places to socialize and a variety of drug-free entertainment options seems particularly important for teens and preteens. The brain chemistry of addiction. When we put mood-altering drugs, which includes alcohol, into our bodies, our bloodstream quickly carries these intoxicating chemicals to our brains. In the brain, drugs set off complex chemical reactions and activities that can distort our sense of reality. We know this altered state as being intoxicated or getting high. Some of us find this feeling pleasurable and worth repeating. Other people find getting high an unpleasant experience, and as a result, will seldom use alcohol or other drugs. Addiction is not about willpower or weakness. Research has shown that addiction process is connected to how our brains are wired. Powerful chemicals called neurotransmitters control brain activities. These neurotransmitters carry messages from one brain neuron to another. The levels of these neurotransmitters can vary depending on how much and how often we use alcohol and other drugs. The cerebrum is the thinking area of the brain. I know I will never take another drink or drug. I know I'm strong enough to be around drugs or alcohol. The brain stem or primitive brain is home to the limbic system and is automatic area of the brain. The limbic system contains the components of our addictive nature. The process of addiction takes place in the limbic system, which is located in the brainstem. The limbic system stimulates our senses smell, motivation, sex drive, and complex emotional responses. It also plays a role in regulating the basic body influence and other actions that are automatic, actions that occur without thought. The automatic nature of the limbic system sets up the addiction process. Let's look at the following: the pleasure center, automatic recall of emotions and memories and thinking versus the limbic system. The pleasure center. To understand addiction, we need to understand the pleasure center. Located in the limbic system, the pleasure center responds to pleasurable stimulation and learns to repeat it. Neurotransmitters including endorphin and dopamine activate the pleasure center. Alcohol and other drugs increase the activity of neurotransmitters, resulting in our high. and our feelings of euphoria, as shown in Figure 2. Pleasure, chemical use, pleasure, chemical use equals getting high. We learn to repeat the pattern. If some is good, more must be better. As we continue using our chemicals, our desire to repeat this pattern develops into a need to repeat the pattern. Our bodies become accustomed to having drugs and alcohol present. Our brains stop producing neurotransmitters on their own. They come to rely on alcohol and other drugs to produce the feel-good chemicals. With or without drugs, we feel lower than low. Our brains are waiting for the drugs and alcohol to do the work. As we were waiting for our brains to do their job, our bodies are out of balance. We experience cravings for our chemicals as we go through psychological and physical withdrawal. Our need to use alcohol and other drugs becomes more powerful than our thinking process that say we shouldn't. Let's take a break. Stop the chaos. How to control your life by beating alcohol and drugs. And we're going to stop on chapter 2, and we will return soon.